Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we're be discussing growing global over a century of the Formica brand with Renee Darrington. Before we get started today, I just want to go over a couple quick housekeeping items that I'm going to introduce Renee once we finish with those. First off, if you have any issues with your webinar today, just click the link that was sent to you, restart the webinar. That'll solve nearly every problem that you're experiencing. So slides aren't moving, we're becoming weirdly pixelated, sound sounds really weird. Just close it down, sign back in. Also today we have AIA credits on this session. If you are an architect or other planner that is looking for the credits, I will be putting into the chat right now the link, and I'll also put it in later during the webinar, just so you can get your information over to us so we can get you your credits recorded. And also, today's webinar is going to be recorded. You'll be receiving a copy of that tomorrow in your email. And finally, if you have any questions, we're going to be taking questions at the end of the webinar, but if you have them, please type them in as you have them. Type those into the chat box or into the Q&A box down there, and we'll get those answered for you once Renee ends her formal presentation. So I'd like to introduce all of you to Renee Darrington. Renee has over 4 decades of experience in international design. Renee began her career in product design with the Kaler Company, and she spent over 36 years so far with the Formica Group, ultimately leading the design development team across 5 continents. Renee directed the global efforts for the company's 100th anniversary in the year 2020 or 2013 and acts as the brand historian, collaborating with museums and publications around the world. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Renee. Thank you all.
Hi, everybody. Look at me. I'm sort of red. Formica's in my blood. It's actually the screen reflecting on me, so it's crazy. It'll change colors. I'm very colorful. So like many of you, I started out my life as an architect and then moved into product design. And how I came into this odd role of brand historian is serendipitous. It was a part-time job that I was helping the business out with. And over the years, it just ended up becoming part of my repertoire. So I'm a bit accidental in this category, but I was very much encouraged by some people that I'd met through the Society of American Archivists, which I joined during COVID, so I could learn a little bit more about how to actively, document history of a major business. It was Paul Laswitz, who was the firm archivist at McKinsey and Company. He was great because he basically gave me advice that yes, professional archivists and professional historians are very well needed in Fortune 500 companies, but that he was a huge fan of internal colleagues becoming the keepers of institutional knowledge of that organization. He said that archiving could be learned, but what was more important was that was more important is to have somebody with the informed perspective that a long-time employee can bring to the table, to know the culture, know the key products, know the key players, knowing the key moments, and knowing the key documents. So that was something that allowed me to lean in and continue to help document our history. I did add a couple of extra slides because I know we're in Ohio. We're in the Ohio based. So I wanted to bring some things that many of you would be familiar with. There's a lot of interaction between the Formica brand and Cincinnati, for instance. So I'm very pleased to bring that to you itself. Marked by years and years of history, the story of the Formica brand has been one of discovery and design and innovation. Now, times are always changing, trends falter, but what we think is that as time continues, we believe Formica is forever. Now, with my 36 years of 112, I can't believe it, but I've been affiliated with this brand for a third of its life existence. So I'm hoping that I can give you some of the insight that I've gleaned in from some of my predecessors over the years. Now, founded in Cincinnati, the Formica company has evolved alongside these global changes, both reflecting and influencing the consumer perceptions of homes, workplaces, and entertainment areas. Since 1913, Formica's modern insulating material has been adapted to the technological advancements of the time. We were in the automotive industry, radio industry, airline industry, and ultimately ended up focusing on the decorative aspects of the laminate that shaped interior designs worldwide. This presentation will provide a visual overview, decade by decade, of how Formica brand has kept pace with these society changes over the past 12 decades and counting, actually. So the Formica brand has endured for 112 years for design and innovation, and we're counting down to 2025. Now, throughout its long and storied history, Formica's staff has taken time to reflect on their significant contributions to the industry. Recognizing their place in history, they have meticulously documented the journey and achievements through various books that you see up here. These books serve not only as a testament to the company's innovative spirit, but to its enduring legacy. By capturing the evolution of Formica's design, technology, and impact on interior spaces, these works are ensuring that our heritage is continued. Now, that's not enough. We have been working with some major institutions with donations of our archives, objects, and important designer furniture to guarantee our place in history. Some of the major archives that we have in place, all of the materials that were collected for the 75th anniversary are now held at the Smithsonian, at the National Museum of American History, and I'm about ready to send them 3 more boxes that include our founder's personal papers that were sent to me from his Florida-located family. We have furniture, designer furniture that's being restored, and those are being donated to the Art Institute of Chicago. I just got a Stanley Tigerman tete-a-tete chair placed. It's in their galleries now. And soon Henry Ford Museum will be showcasing some other furniture that we have donated. And most importantly, and what I'm most proud of, is the product samples of all of our 100+ years have been installed in the permanent collection at the National Building Museum. And I'll talk more about that later. Before we start with the history, let's take a look at the brand mark and standards, because this gives us a great preview how the company evolved from an industrial products company to a decorative surfacing company. And we have worked with influential designers. They have helped our brand mark evolve. One of the most recognized corporate symbols, the Formica logo type, has evolved from a simple letter form in 1914 to a distinctive design featuring an overline or typographic ligature where the F elegantly extends over the rest of the word. Following World War II, a stylish mid-century trapezoid element was introduced and further enhanced by the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. This reflected a shift towards the focus on the kitchen, and we're going to talk more about that later. The brand mark represented both the industrial and decorative focus of the company at the time, with the tagline of "Beauty Bonded, Formica at home with people, at work with industry." The familiar anvil, which is a very eye-catching blend of simplicity and drama, this is still used today and was designed by Raymond Loewy in 1962. In 1979, New York designer Michael Abramson fine-tuned the same mark to allow for secondary branding of the many product extensions we had at the time. The style tradition continued when Michael Barute of Pentagram refined the mark in 1994 and coined the term the Big Red F. So any of you that are DAP grads from UC, you will know Michael Barute. He went on to work with this wonderful firm, and he literally has touched our brand mark a total of 3 times. In 2013, Formica Corporation turned 100 years old and launched an alternative logo and anniversary branding campaign that Michael helped orchestrate. And he's the one that came up with the term Formica Forever. So let's start where the story begins. Herbert A. Faber and Daniel J. O'Connor were engineers from the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company in East Pittsburgh. They left to set up a new company in Cincinnati. They aimed to produce materials with electrical insulating properties for using fabric and plastic and resins. Faber created the name Formica as the new partnership planned to produce commutator V-rings, a rotary electrical switch. A laminate replaced the mineral mica, meaning the stone mica. So the name actually stands for or in the place of mica. So this was a modest beginning. Formica, brand grew then after this to become one of the most recognizable names in the consumer and construction market internationally. And the rest, they say, is history. The founders were supported by early seed money from a lawyer and banker in Kentucky. They incorporated the business as Formica Products Company, with the first orders to supply V-rings for electric motors and timing gears for the early automotive industry. The first rented factory opened on May 2nd, 1913, at the northeast corner of 2nd and Main Street. They rented the third and fourth floors. This is now the site of the Great American Ballpark and home to Cincinnati Reds. Due to the threat of river flooding and increasing orders for V-rings and tubes, the company quickly moved 4 miles north to a second rented location at Spring Grove Avenue and Alabama Street. Here, the founders bought their first large press, 24 inches by 36 inches, and began focusing on sheet production. The first sheet was produced on July 4th, 1914, as an insulated material to be used for the growing radio industry. In 1914, World War I brought on a demand for aircraft pulleys and radio installations, so that occupied the company at that time. By 1917, the company makes its first contacts with the infant radio industry to develop communication components for the U.S. Navy and Signal Corps. In 1919, Formica Company moved a third time, another few miles north, across from the historic Spring Grove Cemetery, which, when built in 1844, was considered outside the city limits. The purchase of land in 2 existing buildings was double the size of the company's rented space. By 1923, a new 2-story concrete building was erected to house new presses and resin treating machines. Investments were needed to make the company's growing list of industrial parts for sale that went into early home radios, automobiles, planes, electrical appliances, textile production machines, and more. By 1921, radios are mostly assembled at home DIY from kits, including parts and exteriors made of polished Formica laminate in black and brown. The Formica Company began its decade-long promotional efforts with magazine advertising. The first known ads that I could find in 1921 and 22 were very text-heavy, illustrated line drawings in black and white with detailed descriptions of our products. Simple drawn ads during this period focused on the technical benefits of Formica products. In 1922, Formica is registered as a trademark for an electrical insulating compound under the name of Formica Insulation Company. In the mid-1920s, the company pushed further to discover new decorative applications for their product. In 1924, a new director of research, Jack Cochran Jr., was recruited from MIT. His numerous patents not only shaped the Formica business, but also influenced future laminate manufacturers worldwide. In 1927, the company pioneers its first decorative laminate using amino resins and an opaque barrier sheet to block the dark interior. The company secures 2 patents for the rotogravure printing process, enabling the creation of multi-layer lithographic wood grain visuals on a flatbed press. This was an attempt to start to decorate those radios that people were developing. The early inventors, these early inventions were the first steps towards what became very popular, blonde wood grain laminates favored by furniture manufacturers. The company also brought in working capital by a new stock offering to extend its research and facilities. Expansion was important at this time, as Bakelite, originally a supplier to Formica, had its patents expire in 1926 and 27. This allowed the company Formica then to use the material freely, as well as competitors started coming in at the time, including Monsanto and Spalding Fiber Company. By 1930, Formica began to promote their decorative sheet business for homes. You can see these ads on the lower right. They're the earliest ads I see towards the home. And these are ads for dinettes as well as what they call cabinet tops. They weren't called countertops, they were called cabinet tops in those days. But I find it really interesting, especially the one for T. Dinette, which was a Formica customer, how it has very kind of old-fashioned styling married with this new modern material. And that's the transition that Formica has gone through. In 1931, the company received three more patents, which included an all-paper laminate, as well as a process by which the laminates were made of cigarette burn resistant. The laminates were made cigarette burn resistant by adding a layer of metal foil. This innovation made Formica laminates attractive for tabletops in cafes, nightclubs, restaurants, and soda fountains. It signaled the move into the decorative commercial interiors business. More business opportunities came as Formica laminate moved from its original industrial applications into the studios of modern furniture designers. Initially, Formica sheets were only available in a few dark colors. The chemists had yet to perfect the clear melamine resin required for light or patterned laminates. The black version turned out to be both an excellent substitute for the then popular lacquer, as well as a symbol of the dawning industrial age. One of the first extensive and influential installations of decorative Formica laminate was at the Radio City Music Hall in Manhattan, which opened in 1932 with a suite of custom furniture designed by Donald Deskey. Deskey experimented with solid Formica laminate for his private clients, even placing it on the walls of philanthropist Abby Eldridge Rockefeller's apartment. In the lobbies and lounges at Radio City, horizontal surfaces of high-gloss black Formica laminate played a leading role, reflecting the bold murals and wallpaper that Deskey had commissioned. So this is really interesting, and there's a tie between Formica being used in the radio industry and then it also being placed in Radio City Hall. So that's kind of interesting how it transitioned into interiors through some of its industrial-based customers. Continuing into the 1930s, light, durable, easy to clean, fireproof Formica brand laminate is the material of choice then for the transportation industry, for ocean liners, Zeppelins even, and railroad cars, as well as the stations, lobbies, and lounges that served these new, swift forms of modern transportation. In 1935, the written catalog lists decorative laminates offered, of course, in black, brown, and natural, but we started to see some limited woods, marbles, and dark colors come into play. With more decorative options available, Formica won several major commissions. Formica was used in the reading rooms at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., specifically in the John Adams Building during the period of 1935 to 1939. This was part of a broader effort to modernize the library's facility with durable and innovative modern materials. Formica laminate was also installed as panels in all the bathroom in Cunard's luxury liner, the HMS Queen Mary. So this exposed a new innovative material for travelers between Britain and the US when it began service in its maiden journey on May 27th in 1936. And this becomes important because our first international expansion was actually into the UK. Now today, the RMS Queen Mary is retired, and even though it operated from 36 to 67 for the Cunard line, it now is on Long Beach, California, and it's a hotel, museum, and convention space. So it's still out there, which is great. After these major institutions, it was still very expensive to produce the urea formaldehyde laminate as it was at the time. The company continued to search for ways to add more color to the laminate as well as to lower its cost. At that time, it was only the dark colors that were able to hide the resin that formed the core of the sheet. So still, we hadn't hit our major innovation. Finally, in 1938, more colors became possible when Formica replaced its urea formaldehyde resins with melamine, which allowed for greater durability and improved appearance. I'm going to talk a little bit about this later, but melamine had been was being popularized at this time because of the durable dishes that were marketed in the US by the company called American Cyanamid. With this new configuration, which was going to become the standard Formica laminate that was so well known and loved in the 1950s, 60s, there were 7 layers of craft paper still impregnated with the phenol formaldehyde dark resin. The difference was that the top layer was coated with melamine and then topped with an opaque sheet of melamine, which when cured in the press became transparent and very durable. This innovation allowed light colors to be used, and the melamine was less costly and easier to cure. Formica could then become a product that was widely available and more affordable. With this important innovation, Formica was soon incorporated into furniture manufacturing and especially kitchen cabinet tops and dinettes. Visual catalogs like this one in 1936 shows some early examples of the color and simple patterns like linen and pearl that would grow to become some of the most recognizable laminate designs internationally. Now, this was right before the war. Formica was endeavoring to interest the big furniture manufacturers of its laminate's functionality and appeal. They did a lot of advertising, but unfortunately did not stir as much interest as they would like. They also sought to excite store fixture manufacturers, especially ones that made soda fountains where Formica was used as edging in the past. Failing this, the company took their destiny in their own hands. The company began to produce whole dinette tops that were then shipped to furniture manufacturers who added legs and chairs. The product proved popular and moved briskly and was increasing in sales steadily. It was only interrupted by World War II, during which the company had to focus on producing war goods. During World War II, only industrial grade Formica was produced, and it found many uses in the war efforts. Sales, which in 1940 had been about 4.25 million, grew to 15.75 million in 1943. Formica Insulation Company in 1941 focused on production for the military, including 88 distinct parts for the P-51 Mustang fighter. They developed a product called Pregwood, which was plastic impregnated wood, and this was actually used for the shaped propellers and airplane parts. Later on, we did other things that were decorative, like handles of knives, as well as bits for sports equipments like golf clubs, etc. But it really came out of this invention needed for the war. In 1945, as World War II was ending, Formica managers met to decide the company's future, aware that the construction field had been dormant for 5 years. They recognized the need to intensify efforts after the war to support the remodeling of neglected public buildings, the revival of companies, the production of office furniture, and the construction of new schools. This all in addition to the kitchen explosion as service members returned home to start families. Patterns like this modernized pearl and linen are introduced to decorate the booming building market. And after the war, like so many other companies, Formica sought to take advantage of the consumer goods explosion. It again began its direct efforts to placing their products in homes and schools and other public buildings. But they picked up on their dinette business again. With hundreds of colors and patterns available, the dinette production category exploded. In the mid-1948, the company produced 28,000 dinette sheets or tabletops weekly, and this number grew to 55,000 in 1950. In 1948, Formica Insulation Company enters the international markets through a licensing agreement with the respected firm of De La Rue. De La Rue itself has a rich history. It was founded by Thomas De La Rue in 1821. The company first produced playing cards, then they printed postage stamps, and then produced banknotes for many countries around the world. They were the ideal partner to expand the Formica brand and technology into these various locations. Formica manufacturing plants then were set up in Great Britain, France, Germany, Spain, a licensee in Italy, Australia, and New Zealand, up until 1977, when De La Rue sold its international Formica businesses to the future owner of Formica, American Cyanamid. I also had met some people out of Turkey that said we worked with the Turkish government, and they called their laminate Formica because of our engagement to help grow that industry there. So this interaction with De La Rue fueled the international expansion of this, simple American-born Formica brand out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And that just continued. A later owner that I'll speak about, American Cyanamid, expanded with plants in Canada, South America. There was 4 in South America, licensing agreements in South Africa, Mexico, and then in the 80s, Formica Corporation as an entity itself set up plants in Taiwan and China to have the Formica brand available in all the continents. In 2000, we did an acquisition of a competitor that gave us more plants in Thailand, South America again, and the UK. So we did a lot of expansion. Oh, and Spain, sorry, in Spain. So we have expanded the brand throughout the world. So let's go back to 1948, though. The company sales of decorative laminate reached approximately 15 million. And it was interesting because the industrial laminates now brought in only around 5 million, or a third of the decorative side. As a mark of the change in direction of the company, in 1948, the name changed from Formica Insulation Company to the Formica Company. By 1951, sales had reached 24 million. Demand for Formica laminate consistently outpaced supply. This was a problem that was aggravated by Formica's policy of producing laminate on order only. Many dealers got around this by ordering material in bulk, and we saw competitors come into the fray. And as you know, Wilson Art, a big competitor of ours, was coming into the marketplace in the mid-50s. So, there's a lot of opportunity for the category. So in retrospect, in 1940, only 1/4 of earnings were derived from the sale of decorative laminates, and the remainder were from industrial. By 1950, that had reversed. From a design standpoint, to restart the decorative business after World War II, Formica fortified its laminate ranges by collaborating with very prominent modernists at the time. In 1958, the company released the iconic and patented design called Moonglow by architect Morris B. Sanders Jr. He was an architect out of New York that put up one of the first modernist townhouses. Unfortunately, he passed away later in the year, right after the introduction, ending that opportunity for creative collaboration. But no worries, we started working with others. So Formica was used extensively. This is kind of a Cincinnati project that many of you may know about. But Formica laminate was used extensively in the first large hotel project completed in the US after World War II. Started in 1948 and started in 1946 and completed in 1948. The 20-story Terrace Plaza Hotel in Cincinnati was a 338-room hotel above 2 department stores. This was the first major commercial project for the architectural firm of Skidmore, Owens & Merrill, as well as for their lead designer, Natalie DeBlois. The international style design was considered radical at the time, and the hotel was widely published and presented as the future of hospitality and retail. Formica real wood was used prominently to clad the interior of the elevators, the wave-like reception desks you see in the ad, and the walls of the 8th floor hotel lobby. As advertisements noted at the time, every non-upholstered surface in the guest room is cigarette-proof Formica, because back in those days, you could smoke in your hotel room, right? It was also used extensively in the various restaurants and bars within the building. Each guest room had custom bentwood furniture by Knoll with black Formica laminate tops and featured built-ins covered with real wood, including a sofa that would slide out of the wall at the push of a button to convert to a bed at night. The bathrooms included innovative curving countertops combining the wash basin and dressing table, topped in an early linen design. And acting as a privacy screen near the hotel room door, there was a versatile piece that was designed to act as a luggage rack, desk, and bar cart, all clad in colorful Formica laminate. This hotel has special significance to one of the founders that I'll talk about later. Excuse me. But also this hotel was supposed to be the first one to feature the modern television in every single guest room. So it was a great location to have it in Cincinnati. In 1948, Formica hires the Perry Brown Inc. advertising, public, and personal relations business of Cincinnati. And therefore, a 16-year relationship begins where Perry Brown creates all those iconic mid-century ads that many fondly remember today. They worked with us up until 1964 to help with the World's Fair House. The archives at the National Museum of American History Museum or Smithsonian holds this wonderful ad portfolio that's captured all their ads. Since the close of World War II and with the growth of decorative laminate, a much larger plant was needed. Formica moved from the Spring Grove property another 10 miles north to the outskirts of Cincinnati, at least at that time. Their new home on 18 acres was next to the recently opened GE Aerospace plant headquarters in Evendale, where land and labor were plentiful. In February 1951, the first 120,000 square foot building was opened to transition production equipment from the Winton Spring Grove place. Further expansions occurred in 1952 and throughout the 50s until the present-day plant reached just under 1 million square feet. The Winton Place plant continued operations until it was shuttered in 1970, and now Formica was fully occupied in the Evendale campus. So those of you local to Cincinnati, that building is still there. It's kitty corner. It's the northeast corner from Spring Grove Cemetery. I think it's a reclamation center now, but those are the original buildings that Formica expanded upon and lived. Now, Formica North America had other plants. We built a plant in California to support the building boom that happened on the West Coast. And we have a plant in Canada and St. Jean, as well as a plant in Mexico that was shut down. So North America had a whole series of plants, but this was the main plant and the main headquarters where all the technology and the R&D center sat after we moved from Winton Place. The Formica company increasingly focused on the consumer. It advertised very vigorously in 1951, spending about $500,000, which equaled about 2% of sales. While Formica brand laminate made its way across America and across the world, glamorizing travel, it also had a huge impact on the American home. And this is where you can start to see some of the styles of the ads. The question of labor was as important to the housewife and contractor as it was to the train operator that used our material. Formica advertisements in women's and shelter magazines appealed to the homemaker and to the home renovator, suggesting that the product made keeping up appearances as a breeze and improving your home was just as easy. And that kind of fostered a whole wipe clean campaign that actually worked both in the US as well as in the UK. I did see examples of it in Spanish and French ads too, so it kind of rolled out in the 50s. Now, after the collaboration with Morris Sanders, Formica Company started to work with customers of their product. As industrial design was a growing profession that became influential in the use of materials in the transportation market for trains, ocean liners, and buses, Formica too partnered with those type of designers. Brooks Stevens, a Milwaukee-based industrial designer specializing in transportation, worked with us in 1946 to 1947, basically while he was simultaneously designing a set of new trains for Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific Railway, or what they call the Milwaukee Road. These trains were known as the Olympian Hiawatha train, and it traveled from Chicago to the Pacific Northwest. Excuse me. Stevens's firm was responsible for all aspects of the train design, from the creation of the new engine with stacked headlights to an observation lounge with lozenge-shaped windows on the top and the dome ceiling, which was called sky top, but hold on to that word, to the interior fittings and accessories. Appropriately, much of the latter was done with the Formica laminate. I was able to spend time at Brooks Stevens Archives at the Milwaukee Art Institute, and I saw the original papers and the specs, so it was really a delight to see him working with our materials at that time. Because he was so influential, Formica then officially hired Stevens in 1949. He first consulted on our veneer product, our real wood, which was this laminated real wood veneer, but then he kind of proposed to the company to try something different. He came to believe that it was ridiculous to use a forest product when a photographic reproduction of wood would suffice. Now, we were doing this because we did have a patent for printing, but what he did is he brought it to the forefront. His solution was called Luxwood, and it was marketed in 1950 as a less expensive look-alike alternative. Within a few years, the marketing folks at Formica rebranded Luxwood and they called it Pickwood, which I'm sure was a takeoff of Picture of Wood. So Pickwood was our wood grain series until I'll talk to you about that later. Raymond Loewy starts to touch our range. Stevens was also responsible for the company's first graphic invention, the still iconic Skylark, Skytop, Skylark. So I know he must have had a ability to help us with the name of that pattern. Skylark was introduced in 1951. It was the result of Formica challenging Stevens to bring the material out of the realm of imitation and into the currents of modern design. Sometimes Skylark is attributed to the better-known industrial designer of Raymond Loewy, but in reality, his office only recolored Skylark in 1954 as part of the Sunrise collection. Now, Stevens, if you're industrial design geeks out there, he was a founding member of the IDSA, the Industrial Design Society of America, and best known for his work on boats and trains and cars, as well as brands like Harley-Davidson, Miller Brewing, Oscar Mayer, Everroot Boats. He even designed their brand marks. Loewy, the Formica company's consultant designer for 10 years from 54 to 64, had a greater impact on the range and brand than Stevens. Like Stevens, he was a customer first who used laminate for paneling, dressers, and tabletops on the refitted SS Lurline ocean liner, which traveled between San Francisco and Honolulu between 1948 and 1963. Though Loewy recolored Skylark, his impact came from his proliferation of patterns, wood grains, and solid colors. His work on the iconic brand mark and the efforts he added to the World's Fair House in 1964. Here are some examples of those. One of the first contemporary designs he did for us was called Capri. And this was actually marketed throughout the world. That's actually an ad on the left from the UK, because you can see they've done some different branding than the US. But yes, Capri was something that has gone on and is very recognizable. The design on the right, that's a color-blocked Nassau. This was designed or penned by a woman named Nettie Hart in Loewy's office, who unfortunately had an untimely death, so we lost her ability to create, and she was doing lovely things. Here we start to tie the knot together, for melamine, that is. In 1956, American Cyanamid, who was a melamine supplier to Formica Company that helped us with the ability to make lighter wood grains and lighter patterns, they start to negotiate to purchase the business from the founders. Now, American Cyanamid popularized the melamine plateware, and that was the same material that was used in our laminate. This acquisition was primarily driven by American Cyanamid's interest in having a captive buyer for melamine, as at that time they were the largest producer of this chemical. Now, at this point in history, Herbert Faber was no longer in the business. He retired first in 1937 due to a heart attack. Later, he became chairman of the board until 1954, and then unfortunately passed away in 1956. And this is where it gets kind of wild. He actually passed away in a taxi on the way to the hospital from having dinner at the same Terrace Plaza Hotel that opened in 1948, featuring all Formica surfaces. So I just find it so interesting, the cyclical nature of history sometimes. That left Daniel J. O'Connor Sr., who later died in 68, as chairman of the board. He was the one that negotiated the deal to sell the business after 43 years of developing a modern material that changed the building world. Once the sale was complete, the company was renamed the Formica Corporation, a wholly owned subsidiary of American Cyanamid. Let's go back into the design world. Some of you are familiar with this one. Again, the iconic white sequin was styled by Raymond Loewy Associates. It was introduced first in 1957. The sequin design was an ideal solution to the seemingly contradictory aesthetic goals of, luxury as well as utility. It incorporated a precious-looking metal into a product that was most often seen in suburban kitchens and roadside diners. This was a way of adding sparkle into everyday tasks, such as making lunch. In 1958, the sequin Gold Rush promotion extended the colors into 8 new pastels. This became the backing of those little irregular gold flecks. This was following fashion trends and consumer feedback that softer hues were more adaptable and usable. Baby pink and aqua were, in their own way, as luxurious as gold. No longer were hotels and hostesses limited to dark colors that would not show wear. So it was all about, celebrating the fact that you could use light colors again. By the late 1950s, the small Formica in-house design team was beginning to create more patterns in-house without the use of consultants. To reflect its reinvestment in the design effort, the Formica company built a 40,000 square foot research and design center next to the plant in Evendale in 1960. During this period, the R&D center had the capacity to silkscreen, and the company's designers created custom patterns. Called the Formica Special Designs, they were created for the commercial market for a dramatic change of pace for surface treatment. They were very large-scale designs. I should have threw some pictures on here. There's a church in Cincinnati that actually uses it as a backdrop to the altar. It was really fun to go out and see that. The design team also needed to feed the in-house rotogravure printing operation, which was for large-scale production. We had about 7 machines in the plant. It was called the grading department. And these were the ones that printed a lot of the wood grains and whimsical patterns from the 60s. So they were all designed and printed internally. By the late 70s, the Formica Evendale grading department was one of the largest printing operations in the world. The papers printed there were used throughout the world in the Formica plants. So they were being shipped to the UK and to Italy and et cetera, et cetera. So it was all over the world. The rotogravure printing presses operated at speeds of 200 feet per minute, and they could print up to 6 colors on solid background paper to create about 180 patterns that we had at the time. And this is one of the quotes that I found in an old company handbook. In the period of only a year, the grading department could produce enough materials if stretched end to end to reach the North Pole to the South Pole and then back to Evendale. So lots of printing. Now, the grading department in Cincinnati was sold in the 80s to one of our largest growing suppliers, Toppan, which was a Japanese company that actually had superior printing methods that were developed. So we went from in-house to external sourcing. We had printing operations in Spain, UK, and France also. Those eventually were shut down and moved out into the supplier market. Went too fast. Here we go. So a high point for Formica Corporation was the World's Fair House at the 1964 World's Fair. This was held in Flushing's Meadow in Queens, New York. Formica World's Fair House was designed by Emil Schmidlin. He was a New Jersey architect who was among the first to build split-level houses in New Jersey, as well as several of the exhibition homes. The house was long and low with a hipped roof, recessed front door, and long rows of vertical windows. Neither interior nor exterior was designed to shock, because the main function was to show that the house of the present could be thoroughly rendered in Formica brand laminate. We also sold building plans, and Formica houses were built all over the US. And in the magazine that you see on the left, there actually was a list of all of the locations where the house was being built. And my hometown where I was born, Sheboygan, Wisconsin, actually had a Formica World's Fair house. Continuing to work in transportation, Cunard's Queen Elizabeth II, which was in service from 1969 to 2000, was the ocean liner that naval architect Daniel Wallace and interior designer Dennis Lennon were able to treat as a total Formica laminate design project, developing new textured and moldable laminate with a feeling of woven fabric for extensive use on board. A special publication called The Formica Scene of QE2 included a chart that showed all the colors that they helped co-develop. So they were involved in not only the laminate design as well as outfitting this entire cruise liner. In the 1960s, this was an interesting time during advertising because the portrayal and role of women underwent some changes, reflecting the broader society shifts. Early in the decade, you saw some of the earlier ads, these depicted women in traditional roles, such as housewives and mothers, emphasizing domesticity and beauty. These ads frequently portrayed women as being obsessed with cleanliness and our household chores. Into the 70s, the women's liberation movement gained momentum, representing a woman in advertising, and the representation of women in advertising began to evolve. This period saw the emergence of the new woman or the superwoman in ads portraying women as independent, career-oriented, and empowered. Formica Corporation also leaned into this category of strong women doing advertising, and they married it with a advertising campaign called Leadership by Design. What was also coming out in those days are very familiar to many of us. It was interesting because many manufacturers like Kohler and KitchenAid, everybody was coming out with similar color palettes, mainly or partially due to Color Marketing Group, which was an organization of color forecasting that started in '64. But we started to see many colors like Harvest Gold and Avocado Green come into the marketplace. It made it easy to style and design with, but it might have become overwhelming. The 1970s saw the continuations of golds, of course, and burnt orange, and Formica had many options of these. Okay, now I'm going to step back and go into architecture. I added the slide for this organization. When I moved to Cincinnati in 1989, that people talked about the Formica building, but there was no connection to our headquarters at that point. So I didn't really understand it until a group of researchers came to work with me because they wanted to document the Formica building for the purposes of remodeling and getting on the Register of Historic Places. So this Formica building, it was opened in downtown Cincinnati in 1970, designed by Chicago architect Harry Weese. It represented that modern brutalist style. It's right next to the Mercantile building that you see on the left of that building. And this building spans between 4th and 5th Street. Now, people thought we owned it, but we did not own it. Instead, the president at the time, Marty Feldman, signed a lease agreement to relocate the management and marketing group that was actually at American Cyanamide's location in Wayne, New Jersey. They were moving everybody into Cincinnati. He signed this lease and we rented out several floors. So that's why we were the naming, but not the owner. We were the naming occupants, but not the owners of the building. Now, if any of you are in Cincinnati, you remember this well, probably, because it featured a tower as well as an arcade that connected the 4th and 5th Street. It provided access to the Cincinnati Skywalk system. It housed our business until 1980, or at least the marketing and management part of it, as well as the Contemporary Arts Center, the CAC, until 2002. And I'll talk a little bit more about that because we have a nice relationship with the Contemporary Arts Center. Today, the Formica and Mercantile buildings hold the distinction of being the most recently constructed building in Cincinnati to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. So these are right now, and I think they're almost done, undergoing adaptive reuse transformation, and their past will be celebrated. And that's in part to the good work that the historians and archivists did to find out more about the history of the buildings. On completion of this mixed-use community, it'll be rebranded as the Historic Mercantile Building, and they will have 2 residential components called Merc and Mica, Mica for Formica. And they're going to feature 150 luxury rental apartments and over 7,600 square feet of commercial space. So this exciting development showcases the past with distinctive airs while catering to the modern urban lifestyle. And there is a website you can go on and you can start to look at rental units there. So that's been kind of exciting to watch throughout my time with Formica. In the late 1970s, Formica formed a design advisory board. It was a group of influential interior designers and architects tasked with bringing the Formica brand out of the 60s and into the present day. This is a little sidebar story. I had the luxury of meeting Michael Graves at an AIA conference once. He was a good friend of my neighbor, Jay Chatterjee, the dean of the DAP program in University of Cincinnati. And again, remember, I only started in '89. Well, Michael said to me that he always wanted to be part of the Formica Design Advisory Board, and he was disappointed that he wasn't invited. And I wish he was, but we then continued to work with him after that, so that was good. The DAB, the Design Advisory Board, recommended that the company stop trying to imitate natural materials like wood and marble, instead to celebrate its synthetic nature. The Design Concepts Collection, this was developed with our Formica France division, included solid colors and high gloss that kind of did patterns in matte and gloss, that included geometric grids, the Pirelli rubber design, the disc design, diagonals and squares. This was kind of tougher and more graphic than some of our previous patterns that we had done. They also pushed for a brand new product category, which eventually was named Color Core. This did have some delayed product development, but they really pushed us forward. Then in 1978, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, they sought to cancel our Formica brand trademark, charging that the word Formica had become generic. Now, behind the scenes, I think some of our competitors were engaged with that, but ultimately the action was dropped, and we believe it was with the support of the business industry as well as John Glenn, the Ohio senator and famous astronaut. Marty Feldman, the president that took us to the Formica building, his family reached out to me and they told me stories about how they had like a memo that said, John Glenn called to let you know that the FTC action was stopped. So that's really cool. It's fun how you get history. It's always in little tidbits. Finally, the new material that the Design Advisory Board recommended we push on forward, called Color Core, that was introduced in 1982. Now, the beauty of this material is that it featured a solid color all the way through, eliminating the dark brown line. And to celebrate the launch of this product category, Formica organized a competition and a traveling exhibition called Surface and Ornament with works by Frank Gehry, Robert Venturi, Stanley Tigerman, Charles Jenks, James Wines of Sight, Massimo Vignelli, and others. And this is a Renee sidebar. In architecture school, I sent away for the kit because I wanted to design something out of Formica. I don't think I would have won with the kind of people that actually did win as a young student, but I think it's ironic that I ended up at Formica after all those years. Now, these projects suggested a whole new design currency for Formica Corporation and emphasized color core laminates' suitability for three-dimensional, highly colored installation. The exhibition was debuted at the Art Institute of Chicago after a first showing at NeoCon. It was so successful that it then began to travel internationally, kind of tracing the paths of the other Formica plants around the world. It was shown at the Guggenheim in Bilbao, Spain, where we had a plant. It was shown in Paris. It was shown in Milan. So this exhibition traveled, and architects and designer chairs were added at each location. It even went on into the Asia division. To commemorate the company's 75th anniversary, Formica's creative director at the time, Susan Grant Lewin, held a reception and product launch at the Rainbow Room at Rockefeller Center on May 24th in 1988. In celebration, the company's beloved Skylark was renamed Boomerang and released in 4 colors, including charcoal, Grecian blue, rosetta, and white, kind of the pop punky colors of the time. These were styled by my predecessor and boss who hired me, Alex de Gregori. He was the director of design. The Boomerang was actually printed in our Formica France operation using the rotary silkscreen capabilities. The company then went on to release a history-rich book called Formica and Design, excuse me, From Countertop to High Top, which was edited by Susan Grant Lewin and then published by Rizzoli. So this was the body of information that was used to create this book. We lost track of it, and then it ended up at the Smithsonian, and now we have it all back on track. So it was great to have a lot of that history. Also at that event, Tiber Kalman, a graphic designer and founder of the New York firm M&Co, was hired to reorganize our solid color portfolio. And he made a presentation at the anniversary event. It was called Color Plus Color, and the line included 180 colors, and which included 80 existing and 28 new. His sample tool was basically a way to organize color into 6 families: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, etc., and then further sorted by brightness, value, and texture. 1988, this is when I joined the organization. This saw the introduction of the Formations collection. This was styled by Alex DeGregori. The collection included various patterns, all inspired by sand and stone, included, and some of you might have used these, graphics, dust, oxide, patina, and volcano, as well as the previously released granito. They ranged in scale and complexity, with graphics being the smallest and volcano the largest. The launch featured a unique brochure that unfolded to reveal a spiral of patterns and colors organized to illustrate the design concept of scale and coordination. This was kind of an industry first of its time, and we actually worked with a wonderful graphic designer based in Cincinnati to create this tool. This became a design model for development of pattern language capable of renewing the communicative power of the surface in today's kind of crazy world. So this was really very, very important. And we were able to charge a premium for it because we were using unique printing capabilities that came out of the Japanese way of printing, which was CMYK. So it was actually a great thing to have into the range at the time. One of the projects I was charged with was to select and work with an architect of note. We chose to work with Lorinda Spear of Architectonica. She was the co-founder, along with her husband, of this firm based in Miami. Everybody's familiar with the building that was featured on Miami Vice with the big hole in the tree in the middle of it. Her bold architecture actually impacted her bold design in laminate. So she created these eclectic designs with intertwining patterns and themes, and these were created in 4 different series. Those I actually had printed through our internal operations in France and in the UK, because we were no longer printing in the US at the time. Lorinda actually later participated in an exhibition with us at the CAC, the Contemporary Art Center, in 2009. So she's continued on with us. I'm going to do a quick time check. Oh my goodness. I am over. I'm still only on 2007, Devin. Should I quickly go through? Too much.
Sure.
What do you think? Okay. Okay. So 2007, since we had a plant in Spain, we wanted to celebrate we wanted to help celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the Bilbao Guggenheim. So working with Daniel Buren, he selected our Formica exterior compact for the red arches going in. I'm going to do the shortened version. So this leads us up to our 100th anniversary. Oh, sorry. Let me go first to the Contemporary Art Center. We worked with the Contemporary Art Center in Cincinnati for a collaboration again with architects, asking 10 practitioners with ties to Cincinnati to design a limited edition piece of furniture using our materials. The results were then shown at the new CAC location, Zaha Hadid's beautifully designed museum. The exhibition was called From Where We Sit and comprised artworks of renowned architects like Michael Graves. Remember, we talked to him earlier, Zaha Hadid, Massimo Vignelli, Lorinda Spear, Tom Main, Jaime Velez, Buzz Yadel, Pete Eisman, and Bill Pedersen. This also marked the time when Fletcher Building purchases Formica Group in July, and that was their intent to expand the building products category internationally. And of course, unfortunately, this was right before the global crash. But the global crash did not stop us. Amid the global downturn, we debuted 180FX. This was a true scale granite and marble collection that sold 3 times its original forecast. Consumers no longer had access to the real stones. They were looking at value. So therefore, we saw 180FX just grow exponentially. The range was so successful that it expanded into Europe, Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. And this was really satisfying the consumer demand for stone-looking countertops. So now we get to our 100th anniversary. And to do this, a global company that had very humble beginnings from Cincinnati, we went back to Michael Barut and the Pentagram team. These designers helped us create an anniversary logo, an exhibition concept, another book called Formica Forever, and a laminate collection. All of the divisions participated in the rollout of a LinkedIn PR campaign. We even gave elements to companies no longer underneath our ownership umbrella. So 4 brands of Formica in South America, we gave access to the materials, as well as the Formica brand owned by PG Bison in South Africa. So we wanted this to be a global celebration. By now, Michael's touched our brand 4 times, which is kind of cool. Now, to capture the history of this iconic company at this specific time, Metropolis published a book called Formica Forever, designed and coordinated by Abbott Miller. He was a delight to work for. And this is kind of where, because I was assisting him in the research and working with all of our divisions, I ended up becoming the brand historian accidentally. This was fun. This is my key role, and this is designing the laminate. So I worked with him to create 12 new patterns that all created kind of a bright but subtle tone-on-tone watermark that we embedded into every one of the designs. This was sold in all of the collections in general. Abbott continued to work with us throughout the 10 years and actually wrote the foreword for a 110th anniversary book. Again, having more fun, we began collaborating with the potter, designer, and entrepreneur Jonathan Adler in 2014, over 2 years, to create 6 bold patterns. Now, he loved mid-century modern, and he came to me with a piece of real lacquered linen. It wasn't our Formica laminate, but he really loved the aesthetic of what was happening during that time period. So he created this design called lacquered linen that were in 4 different colors. But he did some really wild ones too. Again, very graphic and high chroma color. Designing decors for sustainability. This is something that I had launched. We started looking at our raw materials as they went into the decors themselves. So the first introduction was in 2015 with a reclaimed denim fiber where cotton was actually impregnated into the paper making process. No dyes were used, and just the fiber, the denim fiber, turned the product blue. So those are on your wall board yet today if you're architects. Paper terrazzo, this was working with our paper maker where the production of solid color paper is pretty intensive, and you have to get the machine ready and on spec, and there's a lot of paper that gets wasted. I had them start to save that bit, chop it up, and that became our paper terrazzo. And then finally we did a design called Recycled Craft, which was actually really cool because it was 100% recycled content, and I threw a bit of coffee bean chaff in it and fiber and burlap that made it look very natural. So taking the aesthetics and then using the reclaimed materials to create the laminate. So now we're getting up to our close present. In 2019, right before COVID, the Netherlands-based Broadview Holding Company completed the acquisition of Formica Corporation. The sale included our businesses in North America, Europe, and Asia, as well as Homapal, which is a metal laminates-based business in Germany. With this, we have synergies in research, development, and marketing that are executed globally in our footprint. So that's been great. In 2020, Broadview Holdings had a material that we used to try and compete with. So it's really interesting to be bought by somebody that had your competitor in their suite. But we started to produce Phenex in our North American operation. And this is a wonderful cutting-edge material known for its very low gloss, but cutting-edge innovation and high performance capabilities. This was originally developed by our past competitor, now sister company, ARPA Industrial, outside of Milan and Bra, Italy. So it was really kind of great to be married with this other company and do some great R&D and bring it into the fold. So in 2023, Megan Howell, our creative director, and myself really wanted to kind of celebrate our pattern history. And we created another book that just focused on the pattern specifically that you see earlier in the presentation. With that, we went to local architect in Cincinnati, architect Sean Patrick Tubb, who actually wrote a book about the Terrace Plaza Hotel. So he was already very familiar with the Formica brand laminate. So it was really great to work with him and have him capture all of our pattern history. Now, through that collection, dating, and photography of all those historic patterns for the book, we were able to donate a pattern of every design to the National Building Museum in Washington, D.C. They accepted this donation, and that we're thrilled because it ensures that our history will be preserved. It's both digital as well as physical. So it's in D.C. if you want to look at it. And then if you go to Milan, we had a major exhibition that happened during London Design Week a few weeks ago that celebrate our history. So that's on display if you're in Milan until end of September. And just closing it out, after 65 years, the Cincinnati corporate headquarters is now receiving a vibrant makeover. And this is being clad in Trespa exterior cladding. Again, one of our competitors. Now it is the superior material that actually we're happy to have in our fold. So Broadview Holdings, our parent company today, brings us a lot of great technology, a lot of great R&D resources to create products for the future. So as they say, that's our history. We're hoping that as we approach the next big centennial, that Formica brand will be forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. And as I said earlier, if anyone has any questions, please type those in now. We got a couple minutes here for Renee to answer a few questions before we respect your time and cut her loose. We're over a little bit, but we do have one question here, Renee. For people that are looking to match and replace their existing Formica in their homes, what's a good resource for them to start researching and find either with Formica or another supplier, uh, those patterns?
Yeah, that's a tough one because unfortunately we can't, we would love to keep the same designs all the time, but people don't buy them and then we have to delete them. We do get inquiries that come into our office and they're on our website. There's a way that you can reach out and then people send us pictures and we're able to identify and we can tell you if it's anywhere else. I mean, there's an option that it might be sitting in one of our international ranges, depending on how old it is. And then it's shipping it, et cetera. I will say that there is a category growing, and that's called digital printing. Sometimes people can digitally print the paper that's needed for laminate. We have something called, it's called, what do we call it now? Formica. Why am I forgetting the name of it? But we do have a service that we can digitally print. It's expensive when you digitally print because imagine those big printing machines that can print I would say 4,000 sheets in 45 minutes compared to digitally printing a sheet, it's a little bit slower. But first it's identifying it. So if there is a way that you can get to us to identify what it is, go to your Formica A&D rep, go to your Formica distributor, or through the website, email our customer service group, and we can identify, and then we can see if there's a chance that it's around. If it's not around, we can suggest a substitute. We create big charts that say, well, if you like this, and it's not there, we can suggest this. It might not be a perfect match, but it's something that's close.
Sounds great. Next question here is, when did Formica first appear in the interior of trains?
That would have been back with the Hiawatha train. So that was Brooks Stevens, and that would have been in 50, that would have been in 49, 47, 48, the late 40s.
And a companion question, I'm not sure if it's just about trains or just in general, but why do you think there was such a large demand in both Australia and in New Zealand?
Oh, I have a personal story about that. So Fletcher Building, based in New Zealand, I fly in for the first time, go through customs, and they say, they always ask you what you're doing. And I'm like, well, I work for Fletcher Building, I work for Formica, and they said, you have Formica in the U.S.? It's almost as if the brand was so strong in those markets by themselves, they didn't realize it was an American brand. I would say that we were connected up quite a bit in promotion and advertising and decors came out of Cincinnati and then would go into those markets, but they set up their individual manufacturing plants and did their own sale and distribution at that point. So I think it was just the right material at the right time from a growth standpoint. When we
Very
joined Fletcher
interesting.
Building, we had two brands. We had Laminex and Formica, and Laminex brand was actually bigger in Australia after a while, a competitor. And we actually trained the Laminex founder, a guy named Sidney Sykes, how to make laminate. He flew into Cincinnati to meet with Jack Cochran, and we taught Laminex how to make Laminex at the same time we were putting up Formica plants there. So I think it was just the right material at the right time. And some great messaging and help with advertisements that really spread the word.
Thanks, Renee. Final question here. since you've been working on this for several years now as the historian, what are some of your favorite patterns that you've come across in the archive?
Oh, I'll tell you the story of this one. Hold on a second. This is something that I didn't even know existed until well, being a long-term employee, I hauled around 40 years of Formica samples, right? I had files and files. My design department kept it because we would get questions from consumers asking about, you know, do you have any more of this design? So we kept all of those designs, and we had boxes of stuff. This one I think has become my favorite one. The one on the left, Ondine, that was not a printed paper at all. It was kind of an R&D engineering design collaboration. It was where you would take paper, and you know how you make marbleized paper, like for
Yeah.
books. The engineers figured out a way to have water, inks, and oil, and that would be kind of in a big bed. They would bring the sheet of paper down through that water bed and lift it up, and all of those inks would swirl around and create these incredible patterns. So it was one that I discovered, literally back in 2020. I didn't even know about this one. So it was really quite lovely to find out about that one. So I would think that's my favorite.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, Renee, I'm not seeing any other questions. So thanks to you once again for doing this webinar today. It was absolutely wonderful. I will be sending out the recording tomorrow to anyone listening right now. Also, if you need to sign up for AI credits, I'll include that link tomorrow as well. The link's in the chat right now in case you missed it earlier. But thanks once again, Renee. It was a great webinar, and we'll see you all at our next webinar. Thank you.